All right. Ooh. Might have to turn me down a little bit. Oh. All right. Oh, yeah, we're really loud everywhere. Might have to turn me down a little bit. Well, no one can complain that they can't hear me. If you do, you're in the wrong place. Or maybe I'm in the right place. I'm giving Jet something to shoot for. All right. Oh, it's probably because it's still on the live stream. There we go. Okay. There we go. Is that better? That's not bad. Okay. I'm still pretty powerful feeling. Hey, that's an ego booster right there. So let's begin this morning with a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we come before you this morning, dear Father, with grateful hearts and thankful for your people that you've placed in our lives. I know we weren't meant to be alone or go through life alone, and I'm grateful for the community around me and my friends and my family and my church, your church. I pray, dear Father, for everyone here this morning as we talk about community, we talk about the church, and we talk about you, that we look for our lives and ways to grow closer to you. I pray you help me to love others the way you love me. Give me patience when things get tough, and grace when I feel hurt, and compassion when someone needs a hand or a listening ear. Let me be someone who brings peace and makes others feel welcome and safe and reflects your love in real everyday ways, in just common ways, in casual ways. Teach me to celebrate with others when they're doing well and show up when they're struggling. To celebrate each other's gifts and to build each other up in faith and hope. I pray this morning that you help me to forgive quickly, to speak kindly, and to always lead with love. I pray you fill me with the Spirit so that I can be a light in my community, and that my community and your community are the same. I pray you let your love flow through me in my words and my actions, and even in my quiet moments, that they reflect you. Thank you for your grace and never giving up on me or showing me how to love. My prayer this morning is that the community at Southwest is a sanctuary of peace, a place where the lonely find belonging, where the broken find healing, and where your name is lifted high in all we do. Let your grace flow through all our words and our actions. Let you show in our quiet moments and in the moments where we need to be heard. Let us be vessels of your mercy and kindness. And dear Father, let your presence dwell richly among us. May our fellowship be a reflection of your kingdom, a foretaste of the eternal communion we will share with you. Lord, bind us together in unity, not in our similarities, but in your Spirit. Teach us to see one another through your eyes of grace and to forgive freely and listen deeply and to love without condition just as you loved us. God, I also pray this morning that for the world around me, a world where so many are living in fear and grief and in uncertainty, please show me paths. Please show us all paths that intersect our lives with the life of someone in your community or in their own community, that we may show them the hope and peace that comes through salvation. To show them, while they have war and conflict, we have peace and love. Where they have loss, we have comfort, and where they have despair, we have hope. I just pray this morning, dear Father, that you're glorified in our speech and everything that we do. It's in your Son's holy name we do pray. Amen. This morning we're going to be continuing in our discussion. We're going to talk about community. But I would be remiss if I didn't share a real life experience, because it kind of goes hand in hand with the class. It's living life like we're wearing a t-shirt. And I come back to it as often as I can just because I don't want to forget what it's about. So last Sunday night we leave church and we're heading to McDonald's drive-thru. And I was so happy. I was the only one at McDonald's. And I get in the inside lane and I sit there and nothing. Nobody. I'm like, hello? Nobody. Sit there for a minute, maybe a little longer. To me, it sounded like an eternity. Then a car pulls in the outside lane. You've been there, outside lane. They answer them like that. They took their order and they pulled around, and I was like, I ordered ahead. I was so put out that how dare they? Then I looked in the car and I thought, every single person in the car is wearing a blue Southwest shirt. This is a literal thing that happened. And I said, I even told the boys, I was like, this is a learning experience because I want to be put out by the fact that this is not right. But that's what they would see in me. And that's really what this class is about. Not only when my family sees me, but that is important because those times like that where you think no one sees you, they do see you. Those times where you thought you were acting out and it was justified, people see you. And the more I think about it, every time I'm wearing that blue shirt, I think about am I portraying to the people I come around. And it was even more reflected in my actions because every single one of us had our name on our shirt. My goodness. And now not only am I a reflection of Southwest, you know my name's Monte, you know that's Stephen and that's Peyton. You know, if the only thing you see is a bunch of jerks, guess what? You just got a representation of the church. It's a bunch of jerks. That's what the class is about. Putting in the back of your mind, how do I act around other people? And this morning we're going to talk about community. And what is community? Or a community? How do I know if I'm a part of it, and should I care? And while I should have started with this. Also pray for me, because I've changed two things this morning. You don't change two things ever in business, but we're doing that today. First, I changed from how I do my notes, because I found that I get nervous during class, and notes might as well be written in Chinese. So the other one is I've got an analogy I've used before. Guess what had happened before? Fell flat on its face. But I said, that's because they were younger. So I showed Christy yesterday. Boy, that was a mistake. So it didn't reinforce my analogy. So when we get to parts of this, if you're like, just know you've been in good company. So what is community? Before we even begin, let's look at what community was to God. This is where we began, isn't it? God and man in the garden. God walked amongst them as he was strolling through the garden. They had an intimate relationship with God. And I'm going to go through this kind of fast because it's not really the lesson, the meat of the lesson. And then what did we do? We let sin into the world. We put something between us. And I did the community like that on purpose. Because we think of this community that we live in, this world we live in, as being this perfect place. This is where we feel comfort and happiness. And we don't recognize sometimes how broken our community, this world, is. But then Christ dies for us. He gives us a way to be part of God's community, even though we have all of these failures. But what do we do as man so often? Is we prefer to look at our community more like this. God and man, and I'm kind of part of God's community, aren't I? I overlap a little bit. Sometimes I'm way on the left, sometimes I'm way on the right. I like it. What does God's side have? Has hope, salvation, and peace. And if you're curious, we actually talked about this yesterday. Christy, she's like, interesting choice of a rainbow. Because I've had people say, you don't use rainbows. I say, I think we do use rainbows. Because that was a sign of hope. That was a sign of God's promise. But what do we have on our side? Well, we got a lot of brokenness. Sometimes I can be in charge. I am that guy out front. Sometimes we're fighting. Stuff's broken. Stuff's torn up. But once again, that's where we find so much comfort sometimes, which is so crazy to me. As a world, we fight to stay on the right sometimes. So that brings us to community. A community refers to a group of people. It's countable. You can have many communities you're a part of. It's often used to identify a particular population of shared traits and interests. And then there is community. refers to a concept or essence, and it means to be connected as a group. This is where me not moving my papers does not pay off. So, being a community versus the active community. Being a community refers to identity or who we are together as a people of God. The active community refers to behavior, how we live out that identity through love, service, and unity. And I'm probably not going to say this right, but can you be a community without the active community? And can you be a part of a community that your acts of community are not part of their acts of community? I hope that made sense. What do you think? We're not awake yet. Well, that is my problem. I feel for people. I don't know why I am more tired on Sunday mornings sometimes. But no, let's look at it. Because how often do people, and I use that word, and you'll find it in here a couple of times, people being a generic term. Sometimes that is me. Sometimes it's you. Sometimes it's someone else. People identify with, I'm a part of God's family. I'm a part of God's community. However, I have nothing to do with God's community. How do I identify with them? Only through the fact that I'm saying it. Maybe I show up in an app somewhere, but do I have any acts of community? Not that overlaps with theirs. Am I a part of that community? And we'll keep going. And if I strike something in you, then, John 13. A new command I give you is that you love one another just as I love you, and that you also are to love one another. By this, all people will know who you are my disciples if you have love for one another. And then, before you go further, though, let's think about the concept of community and being part of it. Because I think that is important. And I think my analogy is important, even if when we get to it, it's not. And I hope by this everyone will know that shows our community. And I am trying to... Can you talk about community? Yes. Are you talking about the church community or the community we live in? We're talking about the church community. And we will actually see that here in a second. In fact, let me just scooch forward here. Let me answer that in the next couple of slides. Because we are talking about God's community. Because ultimately, that's what our goal is. If we look back at our path that we were talking about before, we have fellowship with people. We have ways to get to know people. That might spur a Bible study. But ultimately, our goal was, how do we have a community with God and His church and His people? And how do we bring other people to that same community? Here's my analogy starting. And in this particular case, I'm going to use your imagination a little bit. I-240 is God's path. That is important. Because with God's path, if I stay right there, I'm staying my course. But what's the first thing we see here? I have a chance to get off God's path. God's path for us is right there, and it's plain as day. We have the opportunity to be a part of that. However, we can stay on God's path, but how often is this how we start looking at God's community? How often is this how, and I don't mean, when I say we, I do mean we, because how often do we notice a brother or a sister that's been sitting beside us for years is no longer here, and we don't even know what happened? Maybe they got mad, maybe they just lost interest. Whatever the case may be, something happened that said, hey, I'm going to get off here. I'm on God's path, and I'm getting off. Now, what's the danger of that? Well, I can still see God's path, and you don't think people think this way, they do. I can see God right there. But right here, look at my options. I can do nothing. I can stop and do nothing. I can turn right, and I can choose my own path. I can turn left. I got options. I feel like I'm in control. But I am so close to God right there. I can see him. What's the first problem we have here, though? Are we on God's path? And if you knew where we were going, you would know the answer is definitely not. Being parallel to God is not being with God. Options. We love these options. Proverbs, trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. I really believe that. I believe if you search Scripture, if you look at the Bible, if you search God, if you reach out to God, God will make you finding him easier. God will intersect your life with people that will make you help you find God. I believe that wholeheartedly. And then Psalms, your word is a lamp to my feet and a light unto my path. Oh man, I'm getting clicker happy. And then we're all familiar with this one. Enter the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to destruction, and for those that enter that are many. For the gate is narrow and the way is hard, and life leads to hard that leads to life, and those that find it are few. Question. How do I discern between God's path and my own? You know, I showed a slide a second ago of, I got off in this analogy of May Avenue there. Why? Because something about being in God's path I didn't like. Or something that was over here I liked more. That is really what it comes down to. We will stay on God's path if we want, or we will stop and look at something shiny, something that got our attention, something we found more important at the time. Maybe it's something physical, maybe it's something financial, whatever it is, we found something that we found more interesting than God. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you find trials of various kinds, for you know that testing of your faith produces steadfastness, and let steadfastness lead to its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete and lacking in nothing. If I'm not meeting any trials, does that mean I'm on the right path? What do you think? I think about this one a lot, and I'll tell you why. If the world hates you, and know it hated me first, before it hated you, if you were of the world would love you. And its own, you as its own, and because you're not of the world, and you chose out of the world, therefore the world hates you. Remember the word that I said to you, a servant is not greater than its master. And then, if they persecuted me, they'll also persecute you. If they kept my word, they will also keep yours. But all these things they will do to you on account of my name, because they do not know him who sent me. If I had not come and spoken to them, they would not have been guilty of sin. But now that I have no excuse for their sin. And whoever hates me hates my Father also. And if I had not done among them the works that no one else did, they would not be guilty of sin, but now they have, and they hated both me and my Father. But the word that is written in their law must be fulfilled. They hated me without cause. Jesus is preparing his disciples for what was coming, and he shared these words with them. But the core idea there is truly follow him and live by his teaching, and you're going to experience rejection and even hostility from the world because their values clash with the worldly ways. But if I don't feel hated by the world, does that automatically mean I'm not on the right path? Do you feel hated by the world? And I will tell you, I've changed since, in the last 7 days, I've kind of changed my opinion here a little bit. Because I would have said, the fact that the world doesn't hate me, or I don't feel hated by the world, is that saying something about me? And I really have been thinking about that, because it makes you question, am I on the right path, or am I just doing actions that the world just doesn't seem to have a problem with? You may live in a time or a place where Christianity is more accepted or normalized. Would you say that in especially the Midwest, that describes us to a T in some ways? We live where we've normalized Christianity. Sometimes it is hard to see the difference between the world and the church because we have made it so vanilla sometimes. And we've made certain things just kind of accepted behavior. If you're stronger on this side where I'm a good person, I help people, I do all these great things to outweigh the fact that I don't have Christ in my life, we can overlook a lot of things. The world's hatred in this passage is specifically preparing the new Christians for oppositions they were going to experience. We do experience persecution. I don't doubt that for a second. But the fact that if you don't feel hated, I don't think that necessarily means you're on the wrong path, is what I'm trying to get at. However, in all of these things, it kind of goes back to us sitting in the McDonald's drive-thru. If I wasn't wearing a blue shirt, I would not have thought about it for a second if I was upset. And that's my mentality. I don't know when this whole blue shirt thing came a thing. I just noticed it one day. And it was probably because one of those days where it's like, I am so put out with whatever this experience is. And then I thought to myself, whoa, I am a representative. People look at my shirt and say, oh, you're a part of something. Oh, do I want to be a part of that or do I not? What do they see in me? Sometimes your experience is shaped by the fact that you're immersed in God's people. Doesn't that say a lot about the people here probably this morning? A lot of people here this morning, we are immersed in God's people. We just don't come into contact with that many people that aren't a part of God's family. That is a true fact for certain people in stages of their life. So you could be doing the best of God's work and you might not feel the hostility just because your community is so focused right now because of your stage in life. And while I think that is perfectly fine in certain stages, sometimes we have to be willing over in these other stages to make sure that we're making ourselves accessible to people in the world so that we can reach other people, reach people that would never have heard God's word before. But that's a very real thing. And then sometimes it's just because it's so subtle. If it could be an opposition or conflict, it could be replaced with avoidance or just a general existence of coexisting. You do your thing, I'll do my thing. You don't bother me, I'm not going to bother you. We wouldn't consider that persecution. However, if you don't think it's rejection, that's exactly what it is. It is a rejection of God. And first, it's a rejection of God. It's not a rejection of you, necessarily. It's a rejection of somebody giving up power. Because if we went back to the analogy of options, which is the only reason we don't go down God's path, is because I want my options. I want to be able to do what I want to do when I feel like doing it, in the way I wanted to do it, and that benefits me the most. This passage isn't meant to guilt or to shame. It's Jesus assuring his followers then and now, but then bad things are going to happen. Don't be discouraged by the fact that something bad is about to happen, because people are going to reject you. And they rejected them very hostile, in a hostile way. He's preparing them, but we can draw from that in this very same way, in the fact that while people may not accept the word that I'm giving them, they might not accept the Bible. They're not doing that to me. I can feel rejected, but they're rejecting Jesus. Now, I can play a part of that. I am totally aware of that. I can play a part that makes it so that you reject Jesus, in the fact that how I approach you about wherever you're at in your life, and that's on me. But if people ignore me, avoid me, back in the old days, if we were out door knocking, if somebody doesn't answer the door, what are you going to do about that? What's that? That's exactly right. You go to the next house. Not because of any other reason, then you're just looking for an opportunity. Count it all joys. So James is letting the Christians both then and now know what's they're coming. Whoop. Let's get back to James 1, though. And then, and if you lack wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given to him. But let him ask in faith without doubting, for the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. For what person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord? Let him ask God. Prayer. Sometimes we diminish the power of prayer. You know, going back to my prayer this morning, the one thing I found about myself a long, long time ago is that I am not a person that is easy to just think of a prayer right there that's meaningful and impactful or whatever to me. So I have to write it out. And I do that, I hate to use the word a lot, but I do that at home because that's the way I can incorporate all of the thoughts I have into something that's meaningful. But I found that if I do that, also I think about what am I wanting to say in my prayer. And then in my prayer this morning, I was talking about community. But I was also talking about how does my community affect the world that we come into. My community being God's family, my community with God. How is that affected? What do I want to think about when I'm preparing? And in this case, I wanted to think about there's a world out there that is at constant conflict with each other. All because people wanted options. All because some point somebody got off on an exit and said, I want to be in charge. I want you to do it my way, and I don't care how you want to do it. I want to do it my way. I want what you got. Not one like it. I want what you've got. You know, we see that so often. But if we go to God in prayer, I think God will open paths to us. Sometimes it's about having faith. In the next verse, he says, ask for faith without doubting. I kind of go back to where I was talking about how typing out a prayer is the fact that it is easy for me to say something in a prayer that doesn't mean anything. And by that, I mean I put as much thought into it as it went from my brain to my mouth sometimes. I remember when I was younger, Guide, Guard, and Direct. Didn't know what it meant. It was just part of the prayer I had every time. Yeah. Was I doubting? No, but I wasn't putting anything into it. I didn't put any trust. But I shouldn't have doubt in God. God's going to hear me. Let's go back. We're talking about options equal control. This is my analogies coming up. Don't let me down. God's plan was simple, wasn't it? To be a community with God and look past the faults of others so that we can see someone who should be in the community of God. It's simple. If I took away just the little notes I had there, what do we have? We have God's path, we got heaven. We got God's path that leads to a community with him forever. It was simple. But what do we do to it as men? First, we add a little bit to it because, you know what? God wants me to enhance it probably. God didn't know that the church 2,000 years ago didn't need this. And I am so smart. He is so lucky to have me. I added flair. And you don't think that's a real thing? That is where all of these exits started. They started with a good idea. Not always, but a lot of times they started with a good idea. I filled every seat in this place, but I lost God up along the way. How sad is that? 1,000 people came to worship and they lost God. Distractions started happening. Marriage, girlfriends, not a bad thing, but it can be. Families, having a baby, not a bad thing ever, but it can be. Well, I guess I can't say that. It's not a bad thing, but it can become one. I remember when we were younger and we had young kids at home, it became easy to embrace we got kids at home. It's like, well, you go to the grocery store with kids, right? Well, yeah, but then all of a sudden it became, why are these kids throwing these obstacles in front of me? And look who I'm talking to. Y'all got more kids than anybody I know. Well, no, you don't. I work with a guy that has 8 kids, all by himself. Then we throw in confusion. We throw in, oh, no, I've got academics. Sometimes we're just sad. But what are we doing here? We are losing God in a scenario like this. Why? Not because of one bad thing. Retirement, I think my dad would say retirement was probably one of the greatest things. And I definitely know Mark would say retirement was a great thing. If my retirement, though, and I can no longer see God, what did that say about my retirement? Any of these things, if I got rich because business, but I lost God. If I got laid off and I lost God, what a sad place. And then we throw in all these distractions. There are so many reasons and so easy to get off path that life can seem hopeless sometimes. This is where we have a direct call and compassion to share and a shared responsibility. A huge part of your responsibility in the community is for the others in the community. If you do not have a responsibility to someone in the community, are you a part of a community? Other than in words, how are you? I'm not saying I would argue with somebody, but I would like to hear the reasoning behind it. If God is part of my life and Jesus is part of my life, but it never involves anybody else, are they? What have I done that's different than anybody else if the only person I'm taking care of is myself? Here it comes. What's the issue with being parallel to God and not really with God or his family? You know, once again, I can see God up there on my left, but I like the stuff on this side. I like the fact that, hey, I want to stop at Henry Hudson's. All right, it's right there. Whoop. I thought I fixed all of those. I got an option to get back on. I got options. I got options. I can go to Lowe's. Now, this is the important part. I'm going to help you out with my analogy. Christy said, don't go too slow, but don't go too fast. If you knew where we were, you would know what the problem is here for this person that's living parallel to God. Because I got an option. I can get right back with God. I can also go to Walmart. But without somebody looking out for me and I stay on this path, what's about to happen? I'm going to get to here. If you haven't seen it yet, I get to here. What's the problem with leading a parallel life? I can see God. It's like 8 foot of grass between me and God. What is the problem? This is a pivotal point in this Christian's life when we didn't even recognize it. It's a pivotal point in this person's life, but it's more important. We're talking about people that are believers of God. They believed in Christ enough to be baptized. They were a part of God's family, and now they're not. But they're awful close. And that's the part that they're kidding themselves with. And let us consider how to stir up one another with love and good works, not neglecting to meet together as in a habit of some, but encouraging one another and to do more to see a day drawing near. We got to stir up. We got to inject our love in our lives in other people's lives, because there are so many people that are right there and they don't know it. And that is the scariest place to be, especially for a Christian. And the reason is because of this, I think. I lost God somewhere. Where did he go? It was a matter of seconds. And I was right there. I was 8 feet from God. 8 seconds later, I can't see God anymore. And then what happened? I don't even notice the fact that if I'm not careful, I'm next to something. I'm next to something over here on the far right, or however you're looking. I'm next to something that looked like God, doesn't it? It sure does. Is God there? No, God's not there. The world's there, whatever's there. All this happiness that I built up on this broken side is there. And I never noticed that my little idea of being parallel to God did not pay off because two things. One is I didn't notice that my path and God's path kept straying further and further away from each other. And the other thing, and this part to me is maybe the scariest, if I back up. How often in a Christian's life are they here? And why is this so important? Because that's the last exit. That's the last chance that person had to be a part of God and be a part of his community, be part of his path. Whether we like it or not, our options one day will end. The options for this person are there right now, but then they get into this thing where they didn't notice the fact that I've left God and I don't even have a plan for how I'm going to get back to God. Because as far as I could tell, when I look out to my left, isn't that God's path over there? It sure looks like it. Sure looks like a lot of people doing a lot of good, but they left Christ out of it. They left God out of it because if I brought God into it, all of a sudden I'd have to do it God's way and not my way. If I did it God's way, I might not fill up every pew. But if I do it my way, not only do I fill up every pew, I filled it up several times. And if I did it God's way, maybe I wouldn't do as many service projects sometimes that somebody that's not doing it God's way is. That is a real thing. Would it be the greatest thing in the world if Southwest became something on the map of, if you want help with something, there's not a kid that goes to school that doesn't have a backpack because Southwest wouldn't let it happen. There's no one that goes hungry because Southwest wouldn't let it happen. There's no one that goes without. There's no one that is homeless. But if we lost God and we lost Christ in the way, what good is that? And is that a real thing? Do we have institutions today that from a man's point of view look great, they look perfect. They do so many good things. They're just not doing it with God. They have no end. They have no eternal life at the end of theirs. They are hoping that I do enough good things that overcomes the fact that I lost God in my path. God never moved, I just got lost. And it's the job of the church to look for people like that. And sometimes you might be doing it in a subtle way where it's like, I haven't seen you for a few weeks, or I haven't seen you in a week. But sometimes I think it has to get a little more drastic, because when people have been parallel to God long enough, sometimes it takes some tough love in a situation like that, in the fact that you need to say, you are not living God's life. And I'm sorry, I don't want to ruin our relationship. I don't want to make things difficult between us while we're here. But I don't want you to think for a second I condone the fact that you don't have God in your life. I get it, you're rich, or I get it that you're successful. I get it, you have a great marriage, or I get whatever all these things are. You don't have God in your life, and that's a concern. How many parents stay awake at night because their kids lost their way somewhere? They got on this parallel track to God because, I like the way Paul said, my religion never became their religion. Sometimes that's on me. Sometimes because I sat in the McDonald's parking lot and I act like a fool because I wasn't wearing a blue t-shirt. I act like a fool in front of my kids. The world didn't see it, but my kids did. And boy, how sad is that if I sent my kids to hell because I wanted to pout. I wanted to act like A silly person that is so overwhelmed with what they want and that their time is so valuable that I never really showed my kids and my family what God was about. God doesn't move, we do. And leading a parallel life to God is the most dangerous place a person can be because it feels safe. It feels like a good place to be. One day a week I get on I-240 and at 11 o'clock I get off. I can't live a life like that. That's not sustainable. I can't live a life where I feel like I'm a part of God's family because I'm in the directory at Southwest. I need to feel a part of God's family because I'm a part of God's family. I know God's family and God's family knows me. That is the intention that God had for us. Us to look out for each other. We love God first, that's because we're on God's path. But just as important, who's not on God's path with me? And what can I do to encourage them to be on it? How do I make God's path, how do I show you all of the great things God has to offer? And I'm not saying by showing you all of the bad things that are going on in your life, because that might not be it at all. You may be living the best life you have, but you don't have God. And that is a tough one to talk to people about. But that is an important one because you're not saved where you're at. But let him ask in faith, no doubting, for no one who doubts is like a wave of the sea. When you're leading parallel lives to God, when you're in this service road and you think you have all the options, why am I tossed about like the waves of the sea? Because all of these options I think I gave myself. You know what I gave the option to do is to do what I wanted to do. That's not an option, that's what I wanted to do. That is such a dangerous place to be because I feel like I want to be in control over the fact that God's in control. We're going to go ahead and stop there this morning. I hope that my analogy somewhat worked. Kids that have no geographic compass in their head is much harder to sell that on, so to speak. So, but anyone that's ever been lost, and I imagine everyone in here has been, can understand. Thank you again. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your worship time together.